In the last video, I showed you how to set up multiple agents in the terminal. And in today's video, I'll show you how to get them to work in sync with each other. Here, I'll show you what happens when I set up a rule and I set up the rule for one agent, but not other agents. They won't work in conjunction with each other. And so you'll notice on the left side, I typed in fast path and it didn't do anything. But on the second one, it did. And that's because there's this file here that I have that is the CLAUDE.md file. And based off some of the shortcuts that we had, you can see that I set it up so I can really quickly see that I have a rule that says, if I start a query with the fast path, write a new MD file at the root with today's date. And you'll see the agent did exactly that. But as you start to work on more projects and you add rules, you add skills, which we'll go over in a little bit, they can get out of sync. And so you'll see here in Codex, it's out of sync and we want to get them to be in sync. And so in order to do that, we're going to set that up. And it's really easy. For this video, we're going to go to my website in my guides. In the first video, you'll see my Mac terminal set up here. And then in this video, we'll have the cross agent setup. And in this setup here, you'll see that we've already installed our agent. In the last video, we said to use a strong model like Opus, and then we're gonna copy and paste this into our agent. So I'll go back here and I'll set up Claude Code and I'll enter this in and let Claude Code set this up for us. So once Claude finishes, we'll get to this state here and we're done. We've synced this up, and there are two things that come from this is now whenever you use Claude Code or Codex, you'll be able to tell it to use rules and use skills, and they will work across all different projects. There's one other thing, a part of that skill that we set up as well, which is in the same shortcuts that I set up in the last video and some of the other terminal commands. I'm gonna make a new folder. Let's call this YouTube project. And in this YouTube project here, we're gonna go and let's use Pi for instance here. And we're gonna now use one of the skills that we set up that will allow us to set up any new project with the synced skill across all different agents. And then the rest of this video will just be going through how we set that up, what happened, what is GitHub, what is Git, what are skills and rules and memories, and how do you use that. If you already know Git or GitHub and just want to skip to certain parts of the video, I'll have chapters in the description so you can go there. After the agent finished using that skill, it created a new private project on GitHub, which we'll talk about what both skills and GitHub are, as well as setting up the Obsidian project board that I've talked about in a few different videos. And I'll link for that video so you can see how to set that up and how to use it as well. And we'll go really quickly here. We set up a new repo or new project, and you'll see that we've linked the agent and Claude file, which I'll talk a little bit more later in this video, as well as the skills. And then finally, we also have the job board. So when you go to Obsidian, you only see one file that you'll edit, and you'll also have the Kanban board to add tasks to. And then you can move those tasks over to any particular board. If you're already familiar with how Claude Code and different agents are set up, you can skip this chapter. But if you're new to using agents, especially in the terminal, there are two things that an agent needs. It needs its memory and its muscles. And we talked about that in more technical terms, which are rules and skills. But you can think about memory as what an agent should always know whenever you start a new session. And then the muscles are when and how to do specific things. Over time, as you use Claude Code or any agent more, you'll start to establish more rules that you want your agent to do, as well as new capabilities and workflows that it learns over time. But one of the problems that we have is now you have more than one agent. That might be Claude Code, might be Codex, Pi, Open Code, OpenClaw, Hermes. There are many different agents, but they all need rules and they all need skills. And keeping them in sync can be quite challenging and difficult. So what we did in the beginning was set them up so you only have to define them once. Now that we understand what rules and skills can be, one of the reasons I like Pi is you can kind of see all the things that are happening here. But now, if we go back into the project and you see how they're set up, we use the list tree command as we talked about in the last video. You'll see the setup that we have here. But there was a lot of things that went on in order to set that up. So let's talk about the two different things that went on. The first thing that happened in this previous session here is that it used Git to clone down the project, which is essentially downloading the project that I had so that we can set up a new project. And I'll close this out here and show you what we use, which is Git. And Git will have all these different commands that we can do, and you can learn it by reading some of the documentations, or we'll go through some of the more common ones that I use day to day and how you can use it with your projects as well. And then the second one that we used was GitHub CLI. And you might have used Git before, you might have used GitHub, but a lot of people don't know that they are two separate tools. Git was created in 2005 by Linus, who also happened to create Linux, the operating system and software that most of the internet is run on, as well as every Android phone. And you can see Linux GitHub right here, where it has a crazy amount of commits, stars, fork. And then 2008 is when GitHub started, which is a website to allow you to host your Git projects and let people work on them together. GitHub didn't create Git, but it did put Git on the internet. Fast forward to 2018, Microsoft bought GitHub. And as you start working on coding projects or even non-coding projects in the terminal, you'll be using both of these tools extensively. So it's sometimes useful to understand a little bit of the history. You can see here within the last year, there are more projects or repositories on GitHub per month in an insane amount. And so we'll be talking about repos, projects quite a bit. And a repo is just a folder with all your files, another form of memory for things that you're trying to do. And we're gonna be using them a lot so that we can ship websites, applications for you, not just build them. But even if you don't ship any websites or applications, it's still useful to know how to use it so you can save files on your machine and have checkpoints so you can go back to them. So now I'll show you how to do that manually. So I'm gonna first close out these things that we can go back into the main page. Here we'll have the actual project, which is this link here. So we're gonna copy the link here to clone it and then go back into terminal. And I'm gonna clone this in a temporary location. And so in the last video, we talked about how to change directory. I'm gonna do a git clone and I have the link here, and then I'll be able to clone that project. And now if I do change directory again, I'll be able to use tab to fill in the rest and be able to go into this exact same folder. Previously, we were in a different folder. We changed the directory like we talked in the last video, cloned this new one here, and you'll see this here. And then in the same way in the last video, we use Z to go back into that previous directory and path. We're now back into the original project. But I'll go through that one more time. So I'll go into temp, I'll change the directory into the agent home. And this time I'm gonna remove the Git file. So if we do LL, we can see the hidden files, and you'll see this file here, .git. This file allows you to save your checkpoints, and you don't have to know it, but if we're gonna clear the checkpoint, we're gonna do rm-rf.git. What we just did there is we wiped that project's memory, the history, so we can start fresh. And this is what the agent did previously. And then the next command we're gonna run is git init. So in any project that you're in, if you want to create checkpoints or history for your project, you would type in git init, and then that would allow you to start that process. So now that we set up the checkpoint, we can run gs, which is the same thing as git status. And this is just a shortcut or an alias that we set up previously. You can see exactly what changed. And previously, we also set up the shortcut GAA, which just allows us to add all of the untracked files into the save point. And now when we do git status, which is GS, we'll see all the files that change. This is all the files that we want to save. And the next shortcut we set up is GC, which is the commit message or what you want to save that as, so you can figure out and find what you saved previously. And I'll put that message, just say agent home. And then now we'll have our save point. And if you run git status again, you'll see it's clear. I'll do Command K to wipe that out, and so we'll see that here. And then the rest, you can leave it to the agent and just ask the agent to do certain things, but I'll go over a few things as well. Once you create your GitHub account, you can type in auth login, and then you'll select github.com and HTTPS, and then you'll say yes, log in with a web browser, and then it'll give you this code. And once you click enter, it'll open up in the browser and you can finish the authentication. But since I've already done that, I'll do Control C, which we talked about in the last video as well, to exit that out. And anytime you're exiting any of your agents, you'll use that same command, but twice. But just so you understand a little bit more, you can run gh repo create to create a new project. And when you create a project, it could be public or private. The skill we set up is defaulted to private. And this is important to remember that whenever you're creating a project, to make sure that it's private unless you explicitly want it to be public. Otherwise, it'll be public to the internet and anyone can view the code or scripts that you wrote. And so if you have sensitive data in there, API data in there, it would expose your secrets. And so that would not be a great thing. So just make sure that you don't do that. And oftentimes, if you let the agent do that, they'll warn you if you're using the smartest models. And then finally, once you already have those changes there, you'll use GP, which I use quite a bit, to push those changes or the save points onto the internet so that you have it saved not just on your machine, but you have it saved in the cloud. So we'll test this out on the YouTube project that we created. We're gonna do T, the shortcut for touch, to create a new file. And then you'll see here when we do GS, we see that this file is not saved, not tracked. And then we can either add it, just that one file using GA and tab, and then you'll see that we'll now save this one file. And then we will commit that, push that, and then now we'll have that in GitHub. And all of this that I just did, this is the manual path, just so that you can understand it. And then over time, if you want more control, you can slowly ask the agent to tell you what commands do and how to do it. And then sometimes that might be faster for small changes. While we primarily talked about Git commands, it's still very important to understand how that interconnects with GitHub. I have this one here in my public one so that you can download it and use it. But unless you want to share your projects with other people, it's good to keep it private initially, and then you can always make it public later. But once you make it public, the history of it will also be public unless you erase that. And so just talk to your agent to figure out, depending on your goals, what you want to do. There are a few other commands that are useful as you start to use it more. I won't go into detail of them, but there's a lot you can do with restoring back to a previous state. You can ask the agent to do that on your behalf. Now that we have a good intro of Git and GitHub, let's go back to the rules and skills conversation that we had previously. As you work on more projects, you'll want to let Claude know, or Code or Pi know, a specific way that you want things done. And so rules will exist for every agent when you start it at the beginning. And then skills are a set of rules and workflows and capabilities that only gets triggered when certain things are true. Let's say on a weekly basis, you need to format a spreadsheet in a specific way for a weekly report, and you end up getting data that is exported from another team and it's very messy. And so you have a skill that says, clean up this messy spreadsheet, or some variant of that. The agent will gain the capabilities to know exactly how you want it as you define it based off of that. If you find yourself needing to do something with an agent 3 or 4 times, it might be worth creating a skill from that. So in the beginning of the video, we set up our AGENTS.md file so that we only have to modify and edit one, even if you work on a CLAUDE.md file when you're working with multiple agents. And you'll see here, this is just a consistent standard way for multiple agents to work. Even though you only see one file here, if using Claude Code, if Claude edits its instructions or memory file, it will also automatically update this agent file so that your rules will stay with you for any new session that you have. You'll see in this agent file or our memory file or our rule file that there's a specific way we want to work in this project that will help us organize and track our work. The agent file will work with Claude Code, for Codex, for Pi. An agent will know how we want it to work with our project board. And we'll show you an example of that. So we'll open up Ghosty, the terminal again. And we set this up in the last video too. We're gonna start up a few different agents. So we're gonna do Command-Shift-D. So we have another split screen. Well, let's do Pi at the top, and then we'll do Claude Code at the bottom. And here, we're just gonna trust all these projects here so we don't have to go through that again. Hey Claude, can you add a Kanban board to my second lane for next to search YouTube for a project on setting up a project board? And then from that, we'll be able to have Claude do that task. And then I'll have Pi at the same time do something else, let's say I already had a task on there. So, hey, Pi, can you help me look and see what's on my Kanban board to do for the next few weeks? And then from that, I can basically send that over, and then Pi will now look for that. And you'll see at the bottom that Claude has created that file. And then now Pi at the top is actually looking at our project board. And now we can actually go in here and look at this. You'll see here, this is our Kanban board, and we set this up in a previous video. So you can also look in detail and see how to set that up. But you can actually move these files around, and let's say we'll move this over here. Oh, we finished this project. We kind of finished that over here. And then you'll see that both Claude Code and Pi were able to read and use that agent file. But you'll see up here that Pi has finished it, and then now it basically showed me exactly what it did. It's the nice thing about Pi is you can see exactly all the different commands that it ran, what it read, what context it has available. And so with Pi, the nice thing is that even if you don't have an agent file set up, Pi will automatically read the Claude.md file, but Codex doesn't, as you saw in the first part of the video. And you'll also see the skills that Pi has available to it directly from that. And then from here, Pi was able to summarize what's on our board. And that's how you can have two different agents be able to read and use the rules and instructions that you set up. As you can see, we have one predictable file, the AGENTS.md, and after modifying one, it was forwarded over to the other one so that all agents make changes to one file and reads one file. There's no second copy anywhere. And if we brought in Codex into it as well, it would do the same thing. So now we have three agents all reading the same file. And then we have one real edit to that file, and then every agent sees it. It forwards it to the Claude.md file. Now that we've talked about rules and memory, the next thing we're going to chat through is skills. As you see here, the project that we downloaded has some pre-built skills in that we can use. And on the right side here in this YouTube channel, I'm just going to start up Claude Code. And with Claude Code, we're going to use a skill that is not native to Claude Code, and that is ChatGPT's image gen. So now that we have that skill, use image gen with this prompt. And here I just have this prompt of basically a memory and muscle that I produced previously. And before, only ChatGPT or Codex could use this. And so we'll actually start another window here, and we'll have Codex create another one as well. And this one, we can just have it use without saying use image gen. And because Codex already has the ability, it can use the image gen skill natively. And you'll see here the skill that is being used is different than the one that we set up. So I'm going to do this other one that we talked about in the previous video, option C. I'm going to go look up image gen, and here you'll see that we have our image gen skill, and here we'll be able to read it. And so C is just cat, which just allows us to view it in the terminal. And you'll see that we have the name, which is the skill, and then the description. And here, because Codex already has its own, you can see that whenever we're in Pi or Claude Code and we explicitly ask to use Codex image gen, GPT image gen, or generating AI images, it will create that. And so now you'll see that these two have created images, and just let's look at what they are. Open that image. And I also have Codex open that image. And you'll see here, we'll have this image here and then this image here. And so this is one of the images I used in the beginning of the video for muscles and memory. And that's essentially how skills work. And so you can now see that skills will work across agents. And let's go back into the skill library that we had, and it works in any of our projects. And so now let's go through and set up a new one. And I'm gonna ask Pi to create a new skill. And in a previous video, I also set up voice. And so if you want to know how to do that, I'm going to do option W. Hey, Pi, can you create a new skill where whenever I ask to do a YouTube search to get a summary of a video, to use YTDLP, the CLI. And then here, whenever I search YouTube, oftentimes an agent will try to search the internet for it directly. In a previous video, I showed how we can give an agent tools such as Agent Browser, and it comes with a skill, but sometimes tools don't come with skills. For example, the YTDLP. And so we'll have to set that up manually. And then from that, once we set that up, I'll show you exactly how it works. In my previous video here, we'll be able to get the link to my Mac terminal setup for AI agents. And then I'll copy the link here. And now I can go back into the terminal, give the agent this, and then ask it to summarize it. And then from that, now that we have this skill, the agent should be able to use this skill to summarize that video, create that documentation for us, and we'll set up, let's say, another agent as well. Let's set up Claude Code now. So while the agent is working, I'll go back into YouTube and I have this video where I actually use Agent Browser and ChatGPT to create an image. This is before I knew that we could use Codex in the command line to generate an image. I can now go back into the terminal, ask it to summarize and create a MD file. And now that Claude has this, it saw the skill that we just created, and then now it can create that MD file from that. But let's go back to Pi up here, and you'll see here in my previous video that we talked about how to set it up. You can now just give it any YouTube video, it'll summarize it, and you can even ask it to add notes to it, ask it questions, and all the commands that we had here, you can now learn. Once you set up this skill, you can give it to any agent and they'll be able to summarize it for you, and you'll be able to talk about it, learn new things about it. And while we wait for Claude to finish that, we can go back on the left side and we'll do Command K again to clear the terminal screen. We'll do LT for the tree, and now you'll see that new skill that we just created. And then here, you'll see that it created a MD file. And now if we go into Obsidian, you'll be able to see the summaries, and we have a summary of that YouTube video. And in that video, I talk about how we set up Agent Browser, how do we use it. And even though we can now create ChatGPT images already in the command line, you can also see how I use it in this video if you wanted to see what else you can do with that. We're gonna go through another task so that you can see the difference between global rules and project rules and global skills and project skills. But before we do that, you'll notice here, this is our agent home, which stores our global project rules and global skill library. And in this project here, we also have the same thing where we have our project rules. And so as you create more projects, you can create skills specific to that project. And I'll go back into this Pi agent again. And this time I'll ask it to create a skill within this project. Hey Pi, can you create a project skill in this repo here, only to be used here, where anytime I ask to summarize a YouTube link, to also create a markdown file of it with the date in the title. And then here, after we send that off, we'll be able to see afterwards how it creates that file. So now that you see that the agent has finished creating the skill, you can kind of see that the agent created this new skill within this project. And so here I'm going to go into the agent file and the skill file, and then now I'll look at the exact skill that it created. And so here we'll also be able to go back and also look at the Claude skill, and we'll also be able to see that it exists there. So it created it once and it will exist in all your agents. This way it captures anytime you drop a YouTube link in this specific project, it will automatically create that markdown file in summary, where you might not want that to be done in every project that you have. So you might have one project that is just YouTube specific and you want it to write that summary, but another one you actually might want it to analyze it after many YouTube videos. And so different projects have different skills and rules that you have, but the same thing happens across all agents. That's the key. And originally for the Claude Code session, we had to explicitly ask it to write a summary for us. And now that we set up the skill, we no longer have to manually ask that agent to do that. So at the beginning of the video, we set up the global rule and skill, and all the agents have that set. And so when we edit any one of those things, all the agents get it. And that's what we call our global rule. And that exists in that folder, so you can see it, inspect it, make manual edits to it. But then you can also add project level rules like we just did. So once you set up your project rules, it's good to remember that project rules don't replace the global rules or skills. Both are read by any of the agents. And so you can set up different configurations based off projects that you work on, where you have rules that apply to all projects, and then specific rules and skills that only apply to YouTube ones or work ones. Now that we went through what rules and skills are, to go back to the beginning of the video where we set up agent home, we have one place that we can define rules and skills that all agents read. And anytime any of the agents make updates to them, they will all get the updates. And while we download that from the internet, we can now customize them, add new skills, and then save it in our private GitHub account so that it can evolve with us. And then we went through how over time we can save checkpoints of changes that we want, so we can easily go back to old versions if skills didn't work in the way that we wanted to and we wanted to restore the previous state where it works better. And this works for any public repo. You'll find a lot of skills on the internet, and you can even use the new GitHub research skills to ask an agent to search skills for any particular thing that you want and get inspirations for them to figure out how they might be useful for you, and then modify and customize it for your use case. Because oftentimes the way that you might want something done might not be the exact same way that someone else wants it done. For example, some of the skills I have might not be exactly useful for you. So you can remove it, add it, customize it. The agent browser one has a few customizations that's unique to my own workflow. And whether you start out a new project in the way that we did with the YouTube project, or if you just forked or cloned a project and removed the history so you can make your own, you can use the GitHub initialization skill to set up that project layer that we talked about in the last few videos to set up your second brain. And now all your agents share one brain, and in the next video, we'll build something useful and put it on the internet.